The letter arrived on an ordinary afternoon, mixed in with bills and flyers. The man almost threw it away without opening it. It looked official, but distant, the kind of mail that never brings good news. He opened it only because something about the return address felt familiar. Inside was a short notice explaining that a relative he barely knew had passed away months earlier. There was no sadness, only surprise. Then came the line that made him sit down. He had inherited a piece of land. He read the sentence again, slowly. The land had been in the family for a long time, passed quietly from one generation to another. He had heard stories about it as a child but never paid much attention. It was far away in a quiet area, and no one talked about it much. The letter said the land was now legally his. There were documents attached, old records, and instructions on how to register everything in his name. At first, the news felt unreal. He lived a simple life, worked long hours, and never expected to receive anything like this. He was not rich, and the idea of owning land felt heavy, almost like a responsibility he did not ask for. Still, there was something comforting about knowing that a piece of his family's past now belonged to him. He spent a few evenings going through the papers. Some pages were yellowed, with stamps and handwriting that looked decades old. The boundaries were described using landmarks that might not even exist anymore. A fence line here, a dirt road there. It was clear the land had history, but also clear that it had not been closely watched for years, because the land was far from where he lived. He decided not to rush. He told himself he would visit someday when work slowed down. For now, he paid the property taxes and filed the paperwork as advised. He believed that was enough to protect what was his. Life continued as usual, and the land stayed out of sight and out of mind. What he did not know was that while he was busy with his own life, someone else had been watching that same land closely. A woman lived nearby on the edge of the property. She had been there for years and had seen the land sit empty season after season. No fences were repaired. No owners came to visit. To her, it looked forgotten. She often walked near it, imagining what could be built there. The location was perfect, quiet, with open views and enough space to build something large. Over time, her thoughts turned into plans. She told herself that land left unused for so long was wasted. In her mind, no one cared about it anymore. She began asking around, telling neighbors she planned to expand. Some questioned whether the land belonged to her. She brushed them off and said the owners were long gone. She spoke with confidence, and most people did not challenge her. Confidence, after all, can sound like truth. Not long after, machines appeared. The sound of digging broke the usual silence of the area. Trees were cleared. The ground was leveled. A foundation began to take shape. It was not a small project. It was the beginning of a large and expensive mansion. Meanwhile, the man who inherited the land had no idea any of this was happening. He was focused on work deadlines, family needs, and daily routines. Occasionally, he thought about the land and wondered what he might do with it someday. But there was no urgency. He trusted the paperwork and believed ownership was enough. Months passed. The construction moved fast. Walls rose. Windows were installed. From the road, the structure looked impressive. People in the area talked about it, some impressed, others uneasy. A few remembered hearing that the land belonged to someone else. But no one stepped forward. The woman took pride in the building. She visited the site daily, giving instructions, making changes, spending large amounts of money without hesitation. To her, the mansion was proof that she was bold and smart. She believed that if anyone ever questioned her, it would already be too late. Back in the city, the man received a routine property tax notice. Everything looked normal. Nothing suggested there was a problem. Still, something in him felt unsettled. He decided it might be time to finally visit the land. Not because of fear, but curiosity. He wanted to see what he owned with his own eyes. He planned the trip for a weekend. The drive was long, and the roads grew narrower as he got closer. The area felt peaceful, just as he remembered from childhood stories. When he finally reached the location marked on his documents, he slowed down. Confused by what he saw, Standing where empty land should have been was a massive structure. Tall walls, fresh paint, and construction vehicles parked nearby. For a moment, he thought he must be in the wrong place. He checked the address again. He checked the old map. His heart began to pound as the truth became clear. Someone had built a mansion on his land. He parked the car and stepped out, feeling small in front of the towering building. The ground beneath his feet felt unfamiliar, changed. The land he had imagined as open and quiet was now taken over by concrete and steel. A worker noticed him and asked who he was looking for. The man said he owned the land. The worker looked surprised but said nothing, only pointing toward the main entrance. Moments later, the woman appeared. She looked confident and calm, as if this was a normal day. When he explained why he was there, her expression did not change. She told him the land had been abandoned and that she had every right to build there. She spoke firmly, almost kindly, but without any doubt. The man tried to explain about the inheritance, the documents, the taxes he had paid. She listened but clearly did not believe him, or did not want to. She said if he had a problem, he could take it up with the authorities. Then she turned and walked away. He stood there for a long time after she left. Anger rose, but so did fear. He felt overwhelmed, unsure of what to do next. The mansion stood as a symbol of something going terribly wrong. As he drove away, his mind raced. He knew this was only the beginning. What he thought was a quiet inheritance had already turned into a serious conflict. And deep down, he sensed that the fight for his land would test his patience, his strength, and his belief in doing things the right way. When he returned home, the man could not stop thinking about what he had seen. The mansion had risen from the earth where nothing should have stood. It was not just big, it was enormous, polished, and completely out of place on that quiet land. Every detail seemed carefully planned, from the wide driveway to the stone walls that gleamed in the sun. He kept remembering the woman's words, that the land had been abandoned, and she had every right to build there. He could not shake the feeling that she had no idea what she was claiming. For days, he went through all the paperwork again. Every tax record, every deed, every signature. He had done everything by the book, followed all the legal procedures, and yet, here was a stranger standing on his property, acting as if it belonged to her. The thought made him restless. He could not eat properly, and he spent nights awake. Planning his next steps, he started visiting the land more often, each time taking a notebook to document what he saw. The mansion was nearly complete now, with workers busy inside and outside. Every time he approached, the woman would appear, almost as if she knew exactly when he would come. She greeted him politely, but there was a sharp edge in her tone that suggested she did not plan to give up anything. One morning, he decided to talk to the neighbors. He needed to understand if anyone else had noticed the land's history, or if they had seen him legally inherited. At first, people were hesitant. Some nodded, some shook their heads. A few admitted they had seen the land sit empty for years, and they believed her claim because she had lived nearby longer and was very convincing. He realized that she had not just built a house, she had built trust in the community. People thought she had the right to be there. The man felt frustrated and a little helpless. He knew that ownership on paper meant nothing if everyone else believed differently. He needed proof, clear and undeniable. The next step was to hire a surveyor. He contacted a local expert who could measure the land accurately and mark the legal boundaries. When the surveyor arrived, he was thorough, checking every corner, every marker, and every line mentioned in the old documents. After 2 days, the results were clear. The mansion was entirely on his land. Armed with this evidence, he returned to the woman and tried to talk calmly. He showed her the surveyor's report, explained the deeds and inheritance documents again, and asked her to stop construction. She listened carefully, but smiled in a way that did not match her words. She insisted that she had invested too much to stop now, and that the land had appeared abandoned. To anyone who cared to look, her words hit him hard. She had already spent a lot, probably taking loans or using savings, and she believed that the size of her investment could secure the land for her. He knew it would not be simple. He had the law on his side, but she had confidence, community support, and momentum. He started keeping records of every interaction, every visit, every conversation, every refusal to acknowledge his ownership. He took photos of the mansion, the machinery, the workers, and even small details like the way she had planted trees and laid pathways. Each piece of evidence would matter later. He realized this was not just about stopping construction. It was about proving ownership beyond any doubt. The woman, on her part, began speaking to neighbors more openly. She portrayed herself as the rightful owner, showing plans and permits she had forged or misunderstood. She was clever, using local knowledge and familiarity to make people believe she had rights to the property. Some neighbors were convinced. Others were skeptical but hesitant to get involved. The man felt the weight of isolation. He had legal rights, but community perception mattered. If people sided with her, he could face delays, trouble, and even local bias in court. He decided to reach out to a lawyer who specialized in property disputes. The lawyer listened carefully, examined the documents, and confirmed that the man's claim was strong. But the lawyer warned that such cases could drag on, costing time, money, and emotional energy. Despite the warning, he knew he could not ignore the situation. The land was his inheritance, his family's history, and his future security. Letting the mansion stand would mean losing something that could never be replaced. He resolved to fight, no matter how long or difficult it might be. In the following weeks, he started the formal legal process. Notices were sent, lawyers exchanged letters, and survey reports were submitted. Each step was met with resistance. The woman filed counterclaims, stating that she had been promised part of the land years ago. She even claimed verbal agreements from neighbors. Though his documents proved otherwise, the process dragged. Every day the mansion neared completion, making it feel like time was against him. The tension between them grew. She became bold, walking freely across the land while he observed from a distance, taking notes. He avoided direct confrontation where possible, but every encounter left him anxious and alert. It was clear she had underestimated his resolve and that he could not be intimidated. Meanwhile, the community watched silently. Some whispered about the conflict, while others simply admired the mansion. Few understood that a legal battle was unfolding, that ownership was disputed, and that the land's history was being rewritten with every brick laid. The man realized that many people would only see the finished mansion and never know it was built illegally. He began to visit local offices, gathering additional proof of inheritance, old family records, and anything that could strengthen his case. Libraries, town halls, and archives became part of his routine. Every piece of evidence, no matter how small, could be critical. He understood that the fight would require patience, careful planning, and unwavering attention. By the time the mansion was nearly complete, he had built a strong case. He had surveyors' reports, tax receipts, historical documents, and records of every interaction with the woman. He was ready to take the next step, knowing that legal action was inevitable. The feeling of justice mingled with anxiety. He knew the next phase would test him in ways he had never imagined. At night, he often lay awake thinking about what had happened and what might happen next. The mansion, once a dream for her, was a symbol of her arrogance and his challenge. He realized that fighting for his land was not just a legal matter, but a test of patience, resilience, and courage. He promised himself he would not back down, no matter how difficult it became. The man had hoped that showing the evidence would convince her to stop. But she continued, as if the land belonged to her. Each day the construction grew taller, and so did his determination. He knew that at this point only the law could protect what was rightfully his. The next morning, he met with his lawyer to discuss the strategy. They went over every document, every piece of proof, and every previous interaction with the woman. The lawyer explained the legal process step by step, warning him that it could be long and stressful, but also reassuring him that he had a strong case. The first official step was to file a formal complaint in court. The man spent hours reviewing the paperwork, making sure every detail was correct. He wanted no mistakes that could give her an advantage. When the complaint was finally submitted, the court assigned a date for the first hearing. The man felt a mix of relief and nervousness. Relief because the law was now officially involved. Nervousness because he did not know how long the process would take. On the day of the hearing, he arrived early, carrying all his documents neatly organized. The courtroom was quiet, with a few other cases being discussed. When his case was called, he walked to the front and presented the documents. His lawyer spoke clearly, explaining the inheritance, the property boundaries, and the survey results. The judge listened carefully, nodding occasionally, and asking questions about dates, boundaries, and ownership history. The woman was confident. She had brought her own lawyer and spoke about investments she had made, claims she had received from neighbors, and the belief that the land was abandoned. Her arguments were well prepared, but the man remained calm. He knew that emotions and stories could not outweigh legal ownership and documented evidence. After several hours, the judge asked both sides to submit all additional evidence within a few weeks. The man left the courtroom with a sense of purpose. He realized this was only the beginning, and that he needed to be meticulous. He visited the land again, taking updated photos, measuring distances, and noting any new construction work. Every piece of evidence counted. The woman continued construction, despite the court proceedings. It was as if she wanted to present the finished mansion as a way to claim legitimacy. Each day, machines worked, walls went up, and the structure took more shape. The man knew he could not let appearances intimidate him. Ownership was about law, not what someone built. During this time, he started speaking more openly to neighbors in the local community. He explained the inheritance and the legal steps he had taken. Some neighbors were surprised to learn the truth. Others had only assumed she was in the right. Slowly, he began to gather support. People started acknowledging that he was the rightful owner and that she had acted without permission. The woman, sensing the change, became more defensive. She tried to intimidate workers and neighbors, claiming they could lose their jobs or face trouble if they supported him. But he did not waver. He documented every interaction, understanding that even small details could matter in court. Letters, messages, photos, and witness statements became part of his growing collection of evidence. Weeks turned into months. Court dates were postponed, lawyers argued over minor details, and the mansion neared completion. It was emotionally draining. He spent nights awake, worrying about delays, about legal loopholes, about whether the court would rule in time before the mansion caused irreversible changes. Friends and family supported him, offering advice and encouragement. Their support became crucial, reminding him that he was not alone. In one hearing, the judge ordered a temporary halt to any further construction until both parties presented their full evidence. The woman protested loudly, but the court decision stood. It was a small victory for him, giving a sense of progress and a pause in the relentless expansion of the mansion. He walked the land during this pause, imagining what could have been if the structure had not gone up. Each tree, each patch of grass, seemed like a symbol of what he was fighting to protect. His lawyer explained that the next step would involve a detailed review of property records, historical documents, and testimonies from neighbors who could confirm ownership and use of the land over the years. The man spent countless hours researching, visiting town halls, and talking to older residents who remembered his family owning the land. Every conversation added weight to his case. Meanwhile, the woman continued to act as if she owned the property. She hosted gatherings, arranged events, and even tried to sell parts of the mansion to investors. It was clear she believed that presenting a finished property could help her claim ownership. But he knew that law and evidence mattered more than appearances. The mansion could be impressive, but it was built illegally. He also realized the importance of remaining calm and professional. Anger could be used against him in court. Every interaction with her, every public statement was carefully measured. He focused on facts, documents, and proofs, letting emotions stay private. Friends who had witnessed the conflict advised him to stay patient, to never react impulsively, and to document everything. He followed this advice closely. The legal battle drew attention beyond just the immediate neighborhood. News of the dispute spread slowly through local channels. Some admired his determination, others questioned why the process was taking so long. The man understood that patience was essential. He could not rush justice. He had to ensure it was undeniable. As the weeks passed, the woman's confidence began to show cracks. She realized that, despite her efforts, his documentation was strong, consistent, and hard to challenge. Small signs of frustration appeared in her interactions, though she continued publicly to appear unshaken. He observed quietly, knowing that time and law were on his side. During this period, he also thought about the history of the land. It was more than a plot of earth. It carried family stories, memories, and connections that no building could replace. This understanding gave him strength and focus. He wanted to protect not just the land, but the legacy it represented. By the end of the year, the legal process was fully underway. Depositions had been taken, neighbors had testified, and every piece of evidence had been submitted. The courtroom had become familiar territory, and the man had learned the importance of patience, organization, and clarity. The mansion loomed nearby, a reminder of the challenge, but also a symbol of why he fought. He knew the hardest part was still ahead, convincing the court to enforce his ownership and undo the illegal construction. But he felt ready. With solid evidence, community support, and unwavering determination, he believed justice would prevail. He understood that the process could take time, but he had learned that persistence and preparation were as important as legal rights. As he walked the land one last time before the next court date, he looked at the mansion. It was still grand, still impressive, but it no longer intimidated him. He saw it as a challenge that could be overcome. The legal battle had begun, and he knew that with patience, careful planning, and a strong belief in right and wrong, he could protect what was rightfully his. Every step forward, every document, and every witness was part of the journey toward justice. And he was determined to see it through, no matter what it took. After months of waiting, the day of the final hearing arrived. The man felt a mixture of anxiety and relief as he entered the courtroom. Every document, every photograph, every testimony he had gathered now rested in the hands of the judge. He understood that this day could change everything. If the court ruled in his favor, the mansion could be removed and his land fully protected. If not, he could face losing not just the land, but also the months of effort, money spent on the legal battle. The courtroom was quiet but tense. The woman appeared confident, dressed neatly, her posture straight. She carried folders and papers ready to present her arguments once more. The man watched her for a moment, recalling all the previous encounters. She had built her mansion boldly, believing that appearances and effort could outweigh legal ownership. Now, it was up to the law. The judge called the hearing to order. Both sides were asked to summarize their claims and evidence. The man's lawyer spoke first, clearly and calmly. He presented the inheritance documents, the surveyor's report, tax records, and testimonies from neighbors confirming that the land had belonged to the man's family for generations. Each piece of evidence was explained carefully, with photos and maps shown to make the case clear. Then it was the woman's turn. She spoke about her investments, the work she had done, and her belief that the land had been abandoned. She mentioned verbal claims and even tried to bring in a few neighbors to support her side. However, the judge asked precise questions about documentation, ownership, history, and legal proof. It became clear that her claims lacked supporting evidence and were mostly based on assumption and her own narrative. The man watched quietly, feeling a mixture of nerves and hope. Every time the woman spoke, he reminded himself to stay calm. He knew the truth was on his side, and he trusted the documents, the survey, and the law. Months of preparation, research, and persistence were now culminating in this moment. After both sides finished presenting, the judge asked for a short recess to review the documents and evidence one final time. During that break, the atmosphere in the courtroom was thick with anticipation. The woman paced slightly, whispering to her lawyer, while the man remained seated, quietly reviewing the notes he had made over the months. Friends and family who had supported him were in the audience, holding their breath, waiting for justice to be confirmed. When the court reconvened, the judge began to speak. She explained in detail how ownership is determined by legal documents and historical records. She acknowledged the effort and investment made by the woman, but clarified that effort alone does not grant ownership. The judge referred to the surveyor's report, the inheritance papers, and the tax records. Noting that they clearly indicated that the land belonged to the man, every word reassured him. He felt a quiet strength building inside. The woman, however, listened in disbelief. She had spent months believing that her confidence and work could outweigh the law. Now, she faced the reality that the law would not bend to her advantage. The judge then ruled that the mansion had been built illegally on the man's property. She ordered that the woman immediately cease all activities on the land and vacate the premises. Additionally, she stated that any financial claim she had made would be denied, and that the man was the sole legal owner of the land. The court's decision was clear, precise, and final. Relief washed over the man like a wave. Months of anxiety, planning, and effort were finally justified. The legal system had recognized his rights, and justice had been served. He could finally reclaim what was his, something that had been in his family for generations. The woman, however, faced the consequences. She realized that all her investments were now at risk. Loans she had taken for construction, money spent on materials, and payments to workers could not be recovered. The mansion she had built with such pride and confidence had become a symbol of loss rather than achievement. Her reputation in the community suffered. As people recognized that she had acted without permission on someone else's property, the man took the time to document the court's ruling and communicate with local authorities about enforcing the decision. He understood that legal ownership needed active protection. The mansion could not simply remain standing as if nothing had happened. Plans were made to either remove or secure the structure in a way that acknowledged the court's decision. He wanted to ensure that the land was fully returned to its rightful state. Friends and neighbors who had followed the case expressed admiration for his patience and diligence. They recognized that persistence, careful documentation, and calm determination had led to a fair outcome. Some even admitted that they had initially doubted whether he could win, given the woman's confidence and the size of the mansion, but the man had shown that following the law and staying committed to the truth could overcome even the most daunting challenges. In the days following the ruling, the woman began to dismantle her activities on the land. She removed personal items, halted work, and tried to negotiate with creditors to manage the losses she faced. The mansion, once a source of pride and confidence, now stood as a reminder of overreach and the consequences of assuming ownership without proper rights. For the man, this period was one of reflection. He walked the land carefully, observing the boundaries, the natural features, and the remnants of the mansion. The land felt different now, as if the tension and conflict had left a mark. But it also felt peaceful, as if justice had restored balance. He knew that while the court had ruled in his favor, his responsibility to the land was ongoing. Ownership was more than legal papers. It was care, attention, and respect for what had been passed down to him. He started planning for the future of the land. Not yet in haste, but thoughtfully, considering what could be done to preserve its value and history. He wanted the land to remain a symbol of his family's legacy, rather than just a battleground of conflict. The experience had taught him patience, resilience, the importance of standing firm in the face of adversity. Neighbors began to acknowledge him more openly, offering congratulations and support. Some had witnessed the entire process and understood the significance of the victory. The community slowly shifted its perception, recognizing that law and evidence mattered more than appearances or bold actions. Though the mansion itself was a symbol of loss for the woman, it became a lesson for everyone in the community about respecting property, ownership, and legal rights. The man's calm persistence and adherence to the law had prevented a potentially larger conflict and had shown that patience and proper procedure could overcome even the most audacious claims. As he walked the land, feeling the soft grass under his feet and seeing the open sky, he realized that the battle was over, but the journey had taught him much more than winning the court case. It had shown him the value of patience, the importance of evidence, and the power of standing up for what is right. The mansion, though now a symbol of loss, had also become a reminder of what could be achieved when one respects the law and perseveres. The man knew that moving forward, he would take careful steps to maintain the land, protect it, and honor the history it carried. The court's decision had secured the land legally, but the lessons and the experiences he had gained were far more valuable. Justice had been served, and a sense of peace returned. But the responsibility and care for the land would remain his lifelong commitment. After the court's decision, life slowly began to return to normal for the man. The mansion was no longer a symbol of conflict, but a reminder of what had been overcome. The woman had left the property, and the land was once again under his care. For weeks, he walked across the fields, observing the boundaries, the trees, and the patches of earth that had always belonged to his family. The air felt different, lighter, and the quiet of the land seemed to welcome him back. He started by documenting everything carefully. The court's ruling, the survey reports, and every interaction with the woman were filed and stored securely. He wanted to ensure that, in the future, there would be no question about ownership. While the legal battle had ended, he understood that vigilance was part of protecting property. Each boundary, each landmark, each marker was proof of the history and the rightful ownership of the land. Neighbors began to notice the change. Some came by to offer congratulations, while others simply observed from a distance. A few expressed regret for doubting him or assuming that the woman had a right to the land. Slowly, the man built stronger relationships with the local community. He shared stories about his family's history, the origins of the land, and what it meant to him. People began to understand the significance of the property beyond just the conflict that had occurred. The mansion itself became a problem to deal with. It was large and expensive, but it had been built without permission. The man consulted with local authorities and legal experts on what could be done. After careful consideration, it was decided that the structure would either need to be removed or repurposed in a way that acknowledged the legal ownership. The woman's investments, although lost to her, could not dictate the future of the land. Every step was taken with care, ensuring that the process respected the law and the judgment. While the practical matters were addressed, the man also reflected on the personal lessons he had learned. Patience had been essential, as rushing or reacting impulsively could have jeopardized his case. Persistence had carried him through weeks and months of uncertainty. Meticulous documentation and attention to detail had proven to be the difference between losing and winning. And above all, respect for the law had guided every decision he made, providing a foundation for fairness and justice. His friends and family were proud, not only of the victory, but of the way he handled the situation. They had seen him grow more careful, more deliberate, and more resilient. They shared in his relief and satisfaction, knowing that what he had fought for was not just land, but a connection to family, history, and personal integrity. The land was more than soil and grass. It was legacy. And that realization gave him a deep sense of responsibility. The woman's departure and the end of the legal battle also brought lessons to the broader community. People saw that ownership cannot be claimed by confidence or investment alone. Legal rights and proper documentation matter more than appearances. The mansion, once a symbol of her boldness, became a cautionary example of assuming ownership without verification. The story spread slowly through conversations and local gatherings, leaving an impression on everyone who heard it. With the land secure, the man began planning its future. He thought about preserving its natural beauty, planting trees, and maintaining open spaces. He considered small structures for practical use, but was careful to ensure that every action respected both the law and the character of the property. His aim was not to build a mansion or show off wealth, but to honor the land and maintain its integrity for future generations. He also made efforts to connect with the history of the land. He visited local archives, spoke to older residents, and collected stories from neighbors who remembered his family. Each story, each photograph, each record added depth to his understanding of what the land represented. It was not just property. It was a piece of living history, a connection to those who had cared for it long before he had inherited it. Through this process, he developed a new sense of patience and foresight. He realized that protecting something valuable often requires more than ownership. It requires respect, understanding, and careful planning. The conflict had been difficult, but it had taught him to think ahead, document carefully, and act thoughtfully. Months later, the land began to take on a new life. Small projects were undertaken with care and attention. Paths were cleared, gardens planted, and the natural environment nurtured. Each day, he walked through the property, observing growth, making small improvements, and reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. The land felt alive, not just with nature, but with the story of what had been reclaimed and preserved. The woman, meanwhile, faced the consequences of her actions. Her financial investments had been lost, and her reputation had suffered. She had learned the hard way that assumptions and boldness could not replace legal ownership and careful planning. While the man moved forward, she had to rebuild her life elsewhere, carrying with her the lessons of the legal battle and the consequences of overreach. For the man, the experience reinforced the importance of integrity and diligence. He knew that in life, challenges would come unexpectedly, sometimes testing patience, knowledge, and courage. The key was to remain calm, follow the rules, and take consistent action. The legal battle had been stressful, but it had also been a test of character, one that he had passed by staying focused and committed. As the seasons changed, the land flourished. Birds returned to the trees, the grass grew thick and green, and the quiet beauty of the place became more apparent. The man felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that his efforts had preserved something valuable, not just for himself, but for future generations. Every walk across the fields, every glance at the open sky, reminded him of the victory, the lessons learned, and the responsibility that came with ownership. In the end, the conflict over the land became more than a story about a mansion or a legal battle. It became a story about persistence, patience, and doing what is right. The man had inherited not just land, but the duty to protect it, honor its history, and respect its value. He had done so, and in the process, he had discovered the true meaning of ownership, responsibility, and integrity. The story concluded with peace on the land, a sense of justice restored, and a life lesson etched into every tree, every path, and every corner of the property. The man had won more than legal ownership. He had gained understanding, respect, and the satisfaction of preserving something meaningful. And as he stood there, looking over the land, he knew that the journey had been difficult, but worth every effort, every moment, and every challenge faced along the way after the long legal battle and the restoration of ownership. The man felt a sense of calm he had not known for months. The land was finally his in every sense, legally and emotionally. He began to think not just about protecting the property, but about its future. He realized that ownership was more than a title or documents. It was about stewardship, care, and leaving something meaningful behind. He started by walking the entire property, marking areas that needed attention. Some parts of the land had been disturbed during the construction, while other sections were overgrown and neglected. He made notes and sketches, planning small projects to restore balance and beauty. Each step was deliberate, every action thought out. He wanted the land to reflect respect for its history, not just his claim to it. Over time, he began small improvements. Paths were cleared for easy walking, old trees were pruned, and new trees were planted to replace those lost. He built simple structures for practical use, such as sheds for tools and small benches where visitors could sit and enjoy the scenery. Every change was measured and purposeful, blending naturally with the surroundings. He was careful not to rush, understanding that patience had carried him through the legal battle and would now serve him in nurturing the land. Neighbors continued to watch his efforts. Some approached him with questions or advice, and he welcomed their input. Slowly, a sense of community developed around the land. People began to understand that the property was being cared for responsibly and that its history and natural beauty were valued. The man realized that this connection with the community was as important as the land itself. It reinforced a sense of belonging and shared respect for what the property represented. He also began documenting the history of the land more thoroughly. He collected photographs, old records, and stories from local elders who remembered his family and the land's past. He created a simple archive, not just for legal purposes, but for the sake of memory and understanding. He wanted future generations to know the story, to understand the significance of ownership, responsibility, and the lessons learned from the conflict over the mansion. The experience had taught him much about human nature. He had seen how confidence and assumptions could lead to mistakes, how persistence and preparation could overcome challenges, and how law and evidence were the ultimate protectors of rights. These lessons became a guiding philosophy for how he managed the land and approached other aspects of life. He also reflected on his own growth. The months of tension, waiting, and legal challenges had tested his patience, resilience, and attention to detail. He realized that the experience had strengthened him, not just in dealing with property issues, but in handling difficulties in life more generally. Challenges would continue to arise, but he now had confidence in his ability to face them calmly and thoughtfully.